Grab your gear, let's hit the water. Paddle and fin where the vibe gets hotter. Kayak fishing, straight talk, hear the stories unfold. Stop and freshwater adventures bold. With multiple hosts, yeah, the crew's all here. Casting lines in rivers, no need for fear. From the east to the west, we're making waves. Join the tournament hype, see how it raves. Paddle and fin, we're on the go. From the lakes to the oceans, let the good times flow. Fishing tales and triumphs will paint the scene. Jib reviews and profiles, you know what we mean. Bring special guests, every episode shines. This is kayak fishing, where the world aligns.
What is going on, everybody? I'm your host, Adam Pross, and I welcome you to another episode of the River Run Podcast. And this one, I am really interested to sit down with this group of guys. These group of guys just happen to be from the state of Indiana, and the state of Indiana has caught my attention. Not only the Pacers, not only for college football, but it's caught my attention. And I don't know if you remember previous episodes with George Ferruccio, who is a veteran waiter, Indiana native. He spoke about the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance. And the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance was something that kind of struck me when I, as George and I got into conversation about this. And I was kind of taken by this idea that there's an actual alliance out there, a group of, it's gentlemen, women, whatever, out there for the conservation of smallmouth and also the conservation of its own states, whether it's rivers, streams, lakes. They're kind of taking a stance at this. So let's get these guys on here because I think we got to dive into this. So we're gonna bring on Jacob, Jake, Bryce, and we got one more guy coming through. Brad's here. And so welcome to the show, guys. Indiana Smallmouth Alliance is in the house. This is cool. Like, really neat. Super excited to have you guys. Once again, thank you for taking the time to come on the River Run Podcast just to, kind of share your guys' passion for smallmouth, obviously, just like mine, but at the same time, taking that time to just, the conservation aspect of it and share your passion for, the drive of smallmouth. So, Jacob, go ahead and introduce yourself, man. Like, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. Yeah, it's an honor anywhere we can get to kind of spread the good word of smallmouth. And I mean, we're just a group of anglers just like you that have grown up and have come to love these fish and the places they live. I mean, you kind of said our goal is just to take a stand for these fish and the environments they live in to try to preserve these for future generations. But yeah, my name is Jake Thompson. Coming from the west side of Indiana, a little town called Crawfordsville, and right next to Sugar Creek, which is pretty well-known smallmouth waters if you're in the state of Indiana. So this is I got put on the board this year. So I'd done some work just as kind of a volunteer, a member in the past. And I've worked with putting together some designs and just been a heavy participant in some trash pickups in the past through Indiana Smallmouth Alliance. So yeah, I'm just I'm pumped to be a part of it, to be of service, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to the future.
That's the River Stewart Challenge, I believe it's called.
Yeah, that was something we did 2 years ago, and it was just a contest essentially with some prizes here and there for just a big incentive to get people out there and to pick up trash while they're fishing. I mean, there in Indiana, there's a big community of kayakers and canoeists. A lot of our rivers are pretty accessible to those types of activities. So, I mean, with that recreation comes a lot of the human trash as well. So, I mean, why not get out there and try to leave it better than what you found it, type of thing.
I love that. That's fantastic. And I think as somebody myself who is always, striving for and helping pushing that idea that, even though, we left it there and we may have not been the person that left it there, that, we can also be the fighting chance to actually make a change, with, and to have a great challenge like that. Awesome. And it takes one person, and stuff like that is infectious. Like people see it, I see it, and it made me want to do it. So no, welcome to the show. Jake, Bryce, what's going on, man? Welcome to the River Run podcast. This is, I'm going to let you take the stage here, and you can do your interaction.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Really just want to, echo Jake and say thanks for having us on, and thank you for using your podcast to promote conservation. It's something we just don't hear a ton about, in the fishing world. There's more today than there used to be, but we're grateful that you're having us on to talk and that you're using your podcast to promote conservation. So thanks. I'm Bryce Clendenning. I am a founding board member of the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance, and currently was our secretary for a couple of years, and now I serve as our president. I am in central Indiana as well, just west of Indy in a little town called Danville. Grew up in Indiana, born and raised a Hoosier, caught my first fish out of a Hoosier stream in the town I grew up in, and sort of have always loved fishing and ended up becoming a largemouth fisherman as a young man, but found my way back to smallmouth when I moved to the west side of Indy, and a coworker took me wading. And since then, it's always been kind of my jam. So, yep. Smallmouth nut, and then that sort of materialized into conservation. I grew up with an outdoorsy father who was a hunter and a fisherman, and he always taught me how to take care of the land and to leave it better than I found it, and how to ethically participate in the outdoors. And so I think that probably that passion actually started when I was a young man, thanks to him. So.
You know what? That's I like those stories. When we talk about how we kind of arrived where we are present today. And that where our passion might have been instilled in us, and to have that connection too with somebody that you might be very close with, to actually maybe at some point continue to share that on with other people. So there's probably a reason why you're the president. You know what I mean? You got a stance and a drive for it. So welcome to the show. Bradley, welcome to the River Run podcast. Thank you for coming on. And I gotta say, I'm gonna let you take the stage, and you can introduce yourself to all this.
Perfect. Well, I'm Bradley Moore, and apologies. I was on the water, whatever day that was, with Bryce, and I was supposed to go to my daughter's boyfriend's baseball game, but I missed it. So I had to go tonight. So making up for being, on the water the other day. But anyway,
first, man, I get it. 100%.
Yeah,
it's all good.
Try to get it all in at the same time. So anyway, Bradley Moore, I am the events, coordinator. I handle some of the website as well for Indiana Smallmouth Alliance. I am primarily fly fishing. That's what kind of got me back into fishing. I grew up, creek stomping, and, I was a kid of the 80s. So during the summers, we were just kind of turned loose. And we all went to the creeks and did crazy stuff and caught turtles and all that. Yeah. As I got older, kind of lost it. around COVID, I was working remote. I worked for a technology company, stare at screens all day, doing video conference like this. Had to, I was kind of yearning to get back out. So went to Florida, started surf fishing at my parents' place. Had a friend that fly fished. I took gear. He had a fly rod, and then I went home, bought a 4-weight, and ever since then, it's kind of eats me up. So, very passionate about being outside. Also, conservation is huge, right? Like, my thing is always, I hear people say like, well, it used to be like this. You hear that with the tarpon guys, right? And I don't want that to be the case for Indiana, or smallmouth, where we're telling our kids how great it was, and there's no fish in the water, right? So I think anything we can do, even if it's small, to make a difference is huge. So
and like I can definitely relate to that, because for me, like I always, and like I'm like, I have 2 kids of my own, and they both love to fish, and I remember seeing both their eyes light up the first time they felt that tug, the first time that fish took that, and they were like, oh my God, and I hope that when they get older and they have kids of their own, that they can share that experience with them. And that's why for me too, it's one of those things where I take such a great stance at conservation, and allowing the sport of fishing, but also taking care of our rivers and streams and lakes and whatnot is just so a critical source, because as much as we love those fish, and as much as we love fishing is not fishing without the fish, you know what I mean? And like, you can have all the tackle in the world, but at the end of the day, if you got no use for it, like that whole aspect of catching fish is, and it's a time for people to escape too, right? So but no, that's cool. I like the fly fishing aspect of it. I was actually, Jake and I were talking about this before you guys were kind of getting in, and while we were backstage, and I said, I kind of had this like New Year's resolution that I was going to go out this year. And like, I love wading, I love kayaking, and I got gear for it. But to actually go out there, I'm going to try my hardest to catch a river smallie on a fly rod. So I'm getting maybe the fly fever. Maybe it's me. I did it many years ago.
Eat you up.
Yeah, and we're gonna see. So it could be sink or swim at this point, but we're gonna try it. So. But no, awesome. This is super cool. So, like, where do we start with the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance here? Like, if for those who may not know what the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance is, for listeners and people who might be watching, who wants to kind of give me a quick little like history cap of where this all began?
I can give you the history.
All right.
Bradley has been at the beginning. So it was almost this exact time 3 years ago. There was no formal Indiana Smallmouth Alliance anymore. The old one had faded out and hadn't existed for a few years. But we had seen some conservation issues come up. So there's some cast netting that takes place in our state in small streams that was particularly concerning. And then we also, our DNR reintroduced native river otters to the state about 20 years ago. And we started to see them showing up in different places and in numbers that were a little concerning. And we had this dynamic of some of us who thought this thing was the issue and some thought this was the issue. And we were back and forth and on it. And through that conversation, I met the previous president from the old Smallmouth Alliance, and him and George and I sat down for dinner. He was like, why don't we just sit down and talk in person about all this stuff? And he really kind of was feeling us out and seeing if we were interested. And that was the spark that kind of lit the flame, was that dinner. And then we had a public meeting and invited a bunch of folks to see if some other anglers in the state were interested in a conservation organization, and they definitely were. So then we went about assembling a board in 2024 or 2023 summertime, and then next January we had some help becoming an official 401c3 not-for-profit organization, put in place our board, and have been running ever since. So that was how we got started, for
Cool.
those that weren't familiar.
No, that's and that's cool that you guys, you kind of went back and found something that, kind of had some interest there, and then all of a sudden brought it, and here we are, your panel. And so what is the stand like? What, like, the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance, like, let's just do like a quick overview here of what is your stance? Like, do you guys, what's the mission of the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance in short?
I would say for me, it's about community. And I've said this in some other places before. When you look at angling in some of the Western states around, fly fishing, or even the kayak guys, there's a big community of like-minded people. And to me, like, that's important, right? The older I get, connecting with friends, being on the water, again, like-minded people, it's important, right? So I thought, if I could get involved and we could bring people together, that was sort of my mission, right? So I, took the event side. I would say at the same time, trying to get our minds wrapped around what was going on with smallmouth bass and maybe some of the risk, right? Whether that is, poaching or environmental factors, or people consuming them, that sort of thing. Like, anything we could do to try to elevate this fish and put it in a light where people go, like, it's a good resource, we should respect it, catch and release, works, right? And sort of that be a thread that's kind of woven through what we do. So there might be some other information there from the other guys too, but I just kind of jumped in there and ran with it.
Thanks, Bradley. Yeah.
You guys, at any point you can add, like, Jake, you got something to add, you can add too. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I mean, Indiana Smallmouth Alliance, for me, I mean, it's all about just protecting these wild spaces that are right next to our homes. I mean, it's just like Bryce. I mean, my first fishing memory of my childhood is just walking through Sugar Creek with a spinning rod in my hand and a little 1/8 ounce jig with a twister tail grub. I mean, it's something that's worth protecting for future generations. And I mean, you go and talk. I work a blue collar job as well, and you go and talk to anybody out there, and I mean, it's like 98% of outdoorsmen or just your regular old people that have some fishing history. That was their first fishing experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, having children, 2 boys that are starting to come around to the idea of the fishing is pretty cool type of thing. It's really important just to protect this resource for everyone, for our community. And I mean, Indiana as a whole is kind of a little hidden gem as far as fishing goes. I mean, we don't have big records as far as your largemouth bass, and sure, we have a little sliver of Lake Michigan all the way up north. But as far as smallmouth fishing, our rivers and streams are very, they're not talked about often. You have Michigan gets a lot of talk about their smallmouth, and then you have Virginia and Pennsylvania and everything out east. But I mean, we have some really, really great fisheries out here, and there's a whole lot of guys in the state that really think that they're worth protecting.
Can I ask you, whereas, like, I've, through a couple of podcasts, I've actually learned some interesting things about smallmouth, and one of the things that I learned is that, smallmouth, like, weren't all native to a lot of states. Like, it wasn't until Thaddeus Norris, who was the American fly fishing father, they called him, that went and actually, like, started putting these smallmouth bass in these milk jugs and taking them across the country and, putting them in different states. So do you guys, like, know, like, was smallmouth like a native species of Indiana, or was that something that was, like, introduced, like, for instance, like, for Pennsylvania, like the Susquehanna, for instance, like, that's another one that was introduced. But so for Indiana, like, we're talking smallmouth is a native species of Indiana?
Yeah, they definitely are. So they're native to the Mississippi River Basin, and all of our waterways feed into that. And so even our reservoirs that have been dammed up have native smallmouth populations that come from the creek or river that's been impounded. And that's an important aspect to INSA too, is these are native fish that belong here. They've always been here, and our DNR does not stock them. So whatever Mother Nature and our smallmouth bass put together, that's, as far as recruitment goes, that's what we have to work with. So that's a big reason that I think conservation is super important for our state.
And the state of Indiana, I want to say, does it not hold a record for like one of the largest smallmouth caught in a lake setting? I think it was, and like it was, I want to say it was like over 22-inch or something like that. But it was like it was huge, and the guys ended up like re-releasing it because they were going to wait to weigh it and whatnot, and then they decided that they were just going to send it back instead of waiting for the DNR to come and like keep this thing on ice and then, go and get like an actual state. So I kind of was like, oh, that's interesting. But like I heard it in a podcast. I want to say it might have even been the Smalley podcast, but I just thought that was kind of cool for, Indiana, because like you're saying, like, when you talk, about the state of Indiana and fishing, like, it's kind of true. Like, I'm not too familiar with it. George was on the podcast, spoke about, a couple of the creeks and whatnot without, really giving any insight to the actual location, obviously. But no, I think that's, I see all these photos because you guys have Instagram. And if you are not following the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance, go on to Instagram, check them out. And give them a follow and like all those smallmouth pictures that they have. But you guys have some pretty epic shots of smallmouth, but at the same time, like your waterways and your creeks and your rivers, like, man, those things look super majestic.
Yeah, they definitely are. A lot of that photo cred goes to Luke Jackson, by the way. He served initially on our board. He's not currently, but if he listens to that, thanks, Luke. Those are a lot of his pictures. He was very creative in capturing all that stuff. So, yep.
And so within like smallmouth within Indiana as a whole, we were talking about like otters. Otters were, some of an issue there. You talked about cast netting. And I remember when George was on the podcast, he had spoken about cast netting. And so this is like a real problem that you guys have down in Indiana. Like this is happening within like all waterways, or is it just some in particular? And like, how are you guys stumbling upon this? Is it being brought to you, like the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance? Like, do people come to you and be like, hey, by the way, like they got cast netting going on in like Sugar Creek? Like, you know what I mean? Like, does that happen, or is it?
We've seen it. I mean, it's, anybody that fishes fairly often will see it around bridges. I'll say there's an Academy Sports by me, and they're always sold out of cast net. So there's a couple there.
Oh.
So, it's not everywhere all the time, but I think it's enough to scare people to go like, hey, this might be something we need to at least talk about, right?
Sure.
That would be, my sort of answer to that.
Yeah, and I'm on the water a lot, as much as I can be. If you ask my wife, maybe too much sometimes. But I mean, it's just, these cast netters. Well, I've noticed in my part of the state, which I am in Sugar Creek, and the cast netters, they're primarily targeting these easy to wade creeks and streams in the state. I mean, that they don't want to go in really deep water where they're going to have to swim with their cooler and their nets and all that type of stuff. So they are primarily targeting the easily accessible but somewhat rural streams and creeks that hold fish. I mean, and they're not even so partial. It's not like they're targeting smallmouth bass. They are coming from usually a different culture to where that was the norm. That was how they put food on the table for their families. So there's just a lack of education there and some cultural differences that are that are really, I guess, the root of the problem. So, I mean, I know on the east side of the state, on the White River, in the center of the state, over on Sugar Creek. I mean, it's prolific in the state of Indiana.
Yeah, the netting thing was a big deal. I would say both those issues you mentioned are ones that we focused on right away because I thought we could have a pretty immediate impact. So we worked with the DNR on upping limits on harvest for otters, and they did do that a couple of years ago. Hopefully they'll do that again in the future. And then the netting thing, we worked with a state senator and got some legislation introduced to regulate those nets, and it made it through the Senate, didn't pass the House. But that said, I think those two issues, they're important. As a whole, though, our state probably, our smallmouth suffer a lot more peril from development and agriculture and water use. So we have a lot of industry that's starting to take up the water. You've probably heard about data center chat and other conservation circles, but those things are big monsters. Like the netting and the otters is limited and local, and they are a problem. But we have some big items to deal with.
Bigger issues potentially coming, right?
Yep.
There's a pharma company building a pretty big facility north of Indy that is potentially going to suck up some water, put some heat in. And the data center thing is huge. The amount of power it takes and water. I think unless you see it or been around it, it's hard to even imagine, what that can do. So,
I when you talk about, like when you just going through like the infrastructure idea that, you have large power plants and companies that are coming in and they're drawing, water from your rivers and streams. Like there's a lot that comes with that, not just only on the impact of the smallmouth, but it impacts like that whole ecosystem.
Yep.
And when that whole ecosystem is impacted, everything starts to slowly fade. So if you can't sustain one thing, the next thing can't sustain, the following, and then, things become very stagnant, and without healthy growth and or even just like water levels that are actually like allowing fish to move throughout these streams. They're not just getting stuck in these pockets all the time, even though I'm sure you've all found puddle monsters in very shallow water. Yeah, it is really sad to see, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just the environment as a whole pays a price.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people, whether you are in the state of Indiana or even up in Canada or across North America, this is becoming more and more the case. More and more that you're starting to see these beautiful creeks, beautiful rivers, kind of beginning to decline. You talk to even people about the quality of fish that they're catching in some of these places. You're starting to see the effects of that already. And you might even hear the term that at one point, like this was the best river to fish, and then now it's like you're lucky to you're lucky to get by. So
yeah, I think the challenging thing is it's hard to know what is like the cycle of heating, warming, temperature swings versus environmental impacts, right? And I think having more official studies done to maybe point out things that we might not be able to see in the data that we have is huge. And that's something that's talked about, I feel like, a lot. And I think the more it gets sort of like normalized, the more it'll be top of mind for people when we talk about allying ourselves with the Department of Natural Resource, right, conservation officers, to make sure that we are all on the same team, sort of thing. So.
And So even within your environmental, like, there, we're going to go from, like, the cast net and the actual poaching aspect, that falls into the poaching aspect of it. And then you talk about, the introduction of otters. I'm just curious, but like, what was the thought process behind, the introduction of otters to rivers and streams in Indiana?
Oh,
Was
well,
it
they're native. They totally belong here. So the DNR
okay?
did
Okay.
a good
Okay.
thing in bringing them back. They were extirpated probably through development and trapping, 100 years ago. And
For sure.
there was a small remnant population of them. And the DNR brought some in to help substitute or supplement that population. And they just naturally spread, I think, as trapping declined and some of our streams actually got healthier for a period of time. And so they're kind of everywhere. But I would say officially, Indiana Smallmouth Alliance thinks they belong, and it's pretty cool to see them. They're cute and playful, and they definitely have a place in our ecosystem.
Oh, for sure.
But we put them back here, and we've altered all these streams through development. So I do think we have a responsibility to manage that too, so there's a healthy balance. But they're definitely not the enemy. We enjoy seeing them.
No, and yeah, like otters. If you ever get I've had the opportunity to see an otter in the wild, and it is a very unique experience.
Do you guys have them in upstate New York?
So where I was in British Columbia, where I'd seen mine, and it was a pretty cool thing. Now I'm pretty sure up where I am in Ontario, there was a couple winters ago, I was out snowshoeing, and I'd actually seen, when I was with my kids, we seen one come up through the ice.
Yep.
And he was like, oh. And then he's like, went back down, and then boop, popped his head up again. And then he came out, and then his friend came out too. And it was like they were legit just going in. It was like kind of like going to the carnival, and it pops up and you can whack them. You know what I mean? Like, not that anybody was going to hit it, but like it was really cool to see. And like they're just so playful, and they seem like they have such unique little personalities amongst them. So yeah, no, and I guess too, like, if you introduce one predator in the end, because I'm sure the diet falls for otters I'm sure smallmouth are probably on it. I think too, though, your guys is like in the state of Indiana, your harvest, do you find that when we talk about catch and release, and you want to push the movement of catch and release, do you still find that you still have quite a few harvests, but aside from the cast netting, like just from people like, like I go out fishing, I catch smallmouth, I'm taking them home, I'm going to eat them tonight, do you guys still find that still a very common case?
I would say probably 95% of smallmouth that are taken from the stream for consumption or just to show off or whatever is from the cast netting. I mean, there's stories I hear every year of like, oh, my granddaughter caught a big smallmouth and comes up and shows a picture of it, and it's a quarter mile away from any type of water source. So, I mean, those fish aren't going to make it, and it probably went to a frying pan. So, I mean, and then there's a couple rivers in Indiana that do have special regulations. So, I mean, it's really, that's for me, it's just the education standpoint. I mean, it's tough to hear those stories. You always kind of cringe. Yeah. But, I mean, it's best to keep composure at that point and just try to educate that person telling the story in a nice, lighthearted way, and just for something for them to remember for the future. So.
Exactly. And I think that's such a great approach that, instead of, us becoming very reactive, instead, we can actually share our passion for it, which it's really cool when somebody's like, oh, did you see that fish I caught? And you're like, oh, like, man, like that you took a picture of it on, like, the picnic table, like, oh, okay. Like, or, oh, you just threw it on the grass, and you snap, like, and I think as anglers, I think, we have a duty at the same time to, instill this idea in our younger generation and for new anglers and even older anglers that, the way that we handle fish is so important, and at the, the way that we support, and I'm sure we're all guilty of, gripping and lipping and, but to actually show safe handling practices, this is, everybody sees the Bassmasters and guys got, 4 smallmouth and 2 hands and he's, hooking them up, and, they've been in a live well all day, and, the chances of reintroduction and survival is probably pretty low at that point. Mortality rate is probably going to go up. But when you guys, as the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance, like, do you guys kind of like teach that idea, like kind of safe handling practices, like how we can be like, not just like we can be like, we understand, like we want to understand how to catch smallmouth, but like once we've caught a smallmouth, like what can we do as anglers to make sure for a safe release? Do you guys talk about that stuff?
Yeah, we definitely, if anybody who goes to the Instagram or Facebook page, you can scroll through our posts, and there's a pretty good mix in there of handling practices and things like that. I think, I've listened to some of your other shows, and we talked about how to hold them properly and keeping them in the water. I think one of the things that I like to see anglers learn how to do is to carry a net with them, because everybody does want to get that picture and, a video, especially if it's their biggest fish. They really want to do all that stuff, and you can absolutely do it safely for the fish if you keep them in the water, keep them in a net. So whether you're wading or kayaking, the kayak tournament guys already do a great job of that. They carry nets on board, and that's one thing we promote. Another thing, when it gets warm here in a few months, we'll start talking about dissolved oxygen levels, and like, hey, maybe you don't need to take a picture of most of your fish. Of course, if it's your best, you're gonna maybe risk it, but those fish are a lot more vulnerable when that water temperature gets up above 80. They don't recuperate as quick from a fight, and we talk about that sort of stuff. We talk about how to get hooks out in creative ways. There's a good post, I think maybe pinned at the top of our page, for like a deep hooked fish. A lot of times you'll hear people say they just cut the line. Well, there's there's methodologies for getting those out, so you don't have to leave the bait in the fish, and you're not going to have to keep it out of the water a long time to do it. So try to keep that stuff for sure.
And as anglers, it happens. It happens all the time, and you can be the most skilled angler, you can be a good beginner, and at the end of the day, you're playing with hooks and you're hooking living things, and living things swallow hooks. And we've all sat there and been like, okay, how are we going to get this out? Because we know that there's a really good chance that we are probably going to kill that fish you see it all the time where people are, digging at that hook, and then they're holding that fish up, and you can just see that thing is like, it's bleeding. Like, it's, you released it, but there's a good chance it's probably going to belly up. So I think that's a really cool stance,
I was going to say, I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I had to buy a new pair of forceps because I lost mine. Forceps are one of those things that I don't leave without anymore, because I never carried forceps when I was younger. And I mean, we all threw fish out and they kind of flop belly up, right?
Yeah.
Messing with that hook. And I honestly couldn't tell you the last time I had that happen. And I think I attribute a lot of that to some small forceps that you can really get in there and be surgical without, yanking on the line and the bill or whatever. So, little stuff like that can make a big difference.
And it's a simple trick like that, and it can make a world of a difference. Go ahead.
One thing I'll add to that, sorry, but I mean, there's myself along with other guides in the state. I mean, they're big proponents of trying to swap out treble hooks whenever possible. And this is just a personal stance on here, but I mean, treble hooks do a lot of damage to the fish, and there is a lot of conventional tackle out there that, I mean, that's standard equipment, right? You got your whopper ploppers or your spooks and all that type of stuff out there. But I mean, they do make hooks out there that we can replace those with, and I mean, it reduces your chance a lot of severely mangling that fish's mouth and jaw structure.
I think, and that's such a great point that you brought up, because at the same time, I've heard of a lot of people too who, what they'll do is with their barb, they'll file it down. So, and like, I guess it's a little more of a technique to actually like keep the fish pinned.
Yep.
But I was like, oh, that's really neat. Like or you hear people like, I don't use barbs, but I hate to say it, like as much as the whopper plopper is, it's a fun bait to throw. Man, I tell you, I get nervous sometimes when I see a fish hit that, or even like throwing like bigger baits with bigger treble hooks. Like I don't want to glue something's mouth shut. And at the same time, when you think of a smallmouth coming up and eating something, and you got that hook, that treble hook is almost at the belly area of the bait, and by the time you come to actually set that hook, and that thing's maybe gobbled half of that bait already, it's like, man, that treble hook is like going to do so much damage in that thing. And I've listened to podcasts too where guys have spoken about the whopper plopper, and like, they're catching fish that are like missing eyes, they're just ripped apart. And it's from these treble hook baits. And the treble hook baits are already annoying enough, because once you've caught the fish and you get it in, as any angler knows, there's a point. What happens next? Well, you got a good chance you're probably going to tag yourself. And if you haven't done it yet, it's.
I was going to say that you're going to end up wearing it probably. Right?
Yeah, you're going to wear it. So, yeah, no, like that's I like that stance, and there is a lot of conventional tackle that you really don't need treble hook baits for. And also at the same time, great idea, swapping out the hooks for something else, you know what I mean, like a different style.
I think that whopper plopper issue a lot of times is it's such a widely popular bait. It may be as much like Bradley talked about forceps. It may be just inexperienced guys that don't know how to get a hook out well, and they just start yanking on the bait because it has huge hooks, and you can get a good handle on that bait and just yank it out of a fish. Yeah. So it may not necessarily be, and I fish gear and I fish fly, and at the end of the day, this is a blood sport. Like there is some, like if you don't want to hurt the fish, you got to stay home. So, but there are things we can do to be better about it. I think as an alliance, like that's what we try to do, is just give people information so they can kind of make their own decision. We're not saying
100%.
There's
no wrong or right way to do this. It's just the idea is, hey, we have some information, and if you're willing to listen, or if you are looking for some insight, you know where to find it, or you know who to talk to. So I think that's kind of a cool part.
Yeah, I'll add too. I mean, you look at some of the great conservationists kind of through history and even current ones. I mean, generally the most outspoken conservationists come from a hunting and angling type background, to where they've felt this connection with this creature or fish of some kind that just really speaks to them and draws them, and that's what draws them out into the outdoors and makes them realize that this is all worth protecting. So I mean, I feel like that's where all of us here are coming from. I mean, of course, we all like to look out at a beautiful nature and like, oh, that's a pretty stream as we're driving down the road. But once you're actually out there, it becomes so much more personal, and you just feel more connected to it.
Man, put your feet in the river and walk through it, and you have a whole new experience of feeling grounded. You know what I mean? Like, and the idea of that water flowing through and around you. For me, it's calm water to get out there, and it is true. You see it from the road, but once you're actually in it, it is a whole other experience.
It's also free, right? That's the big thing,
There you go. I like
floating
that.
A lot of times when I'm looking at this, like, how did I not do this earlier in life, right? And it's just, I didn't know,
it's funny you say that. I look back now and I'm like, why did I like, I fished when I was a kid, and then, you know, I kind of fished here and there when I was a teenager, and then, you know, in my 20s I kind of got back into it, and I was like, why did I wait? Why did I ever stop? Like, this is, you know, this is my passion. Another thing that I you know, if you want to just kind of, just before we go on to the agenda aspect of the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance, but you guys like, just on the conservation aspect of it, the environmental aspect of invasive species in Indiana, and you guys filmed a pretty cool video. It caught my eye, and it was on the Asian bush honeysuckle. And, you know, this invasive, I guess would be considered a plant tree. You know, we're talking erosion of riverbanks here. Also, the flow of, like, you know, from heavy rainfall, but, you know, root structures that are getting, you know, presented. Like, how did you, like, another interesting stance to, you know, one thing I never really would have thought of, and here you guys are out there in the bush, chopping these down. You know, you got the wood chipper going, but, like, just touch on this. This is really interesting.
Yeah, that was a partner project. So we just volunteered for another conservation organization in our state. So the Friends of White River, they formed when we had a large fish kill on that river due to industry in the late 90s, early 2000s, but they still live on today, and they're whole ecosystem focused. So they had this money that was donated to a particular plot of land, and it was full of that bush honeysuckle. So we went out there and participated with them. It was their project. But yeah, it's smallmouth conservation is way more than just catch and release, because if they don't have healthy places to live, they're not going to be around in their fullest numbers, you know. So
now, the biggest thing, like, and are you seeing this across Indiana as a whole, or is it like in certain areas that? Okay.
Oh man, it's you. I don't even think you realize it. Like, I have a creek that runs through the back of my neighborhood, and it's covered in it. It's choked everything out, and it's not anything I really thought about. You know, it's one of those things you're like, man, this stuff is dense, and I can kind of get under it, and then you find out what it is, and then you kind of take a look at what it does, and you're like, oh man, it blocks everything else. You know, it can do that. And again, it can be pretty and have flowers and all that. And I that's another one of those where I think some education just on, you know, some of the natives we have and the impacts, you know, could help. Do we think we'd ever eradicate it all? I mean, man, it's everywhere. But, you know, I think going down with a fight's probably the best way to do it, right?
And it's got to start somewhere, right? Like, we can talk about it, but when we take action, you know, we're you know, a small change. You know, it may not make it a huge change right away, but it's a start, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's heading in the right direction. So no, like, and that was with the Friends of the White River, right?
That's right.
River, White River Conservation. No, that's what I mean. Like, anglers going out there and doing just more than, you know, like you said, talking about catch and release and the importance of, you know, fish handling, and, you know, just the ecological, or even going into the aspect of, you know, the industrial, you know, aspect of, you know, habitat loss. And now you're focusing on invasive plants. So I was kind of taken by that, because I was like, I never would have thought that. And to be honest, when you started to kind of list off like its effects, I was like, wow, like, yeah, that does make a lot of, it does seem to have quite a detrimental effect to the rivers and pride creeks and streams and whatnot throughout Indiana.
I think
Bryce, correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of that honeysuckle is in semi developed areas, right?
It's
So,
most
yeah.
prevalent in urban settings, and
Yeah.
the birds. So it produces like a very small red berry in the fall, and birds just love to eat those, and so it spreads prolifically along the stream banks. There's a few streams that I know of in the state that don't have it, and they look wildly different on the banks.
Yeah. I mean,
Lower
yeah,
slope,
I can name a few too.
the erosion, lots more plant diversity. You can actually see up into the forest while you're waiting. Whereas that honeysuckle, like you just look at a wall of it for miles when it's around.
It's almost like a jungle, like
Yep.
a hedge jungle. It's weird.
It's just bushes forever.
Yeah, and Bryce touched on it there a little bit. I mean, it's just the variety of native plants, and I don't know. I know there's a few museums and stuff out there, but that just shows like the actual natural native grasses that are supposed to exist in a lot of these buffer zones, kind of between the river grounds and the actual stream itself. I mean, if we don't have the proper buffer zones between these agricultural areas and the stream itself, you get a lot of sedimentation runoff.
Yeah.
And that includes a lot of pesticides or fertilizers, which can cause a lot of issues for actual water quality and contribute to algae blooms. So I mean, it's a very complicated problem. With there's tons of, I mean, there's other non-native plants that a lot of river alliances and conservation agencies work for, like the garlic mustard is another big one in the state.
Wow.
That can just completely wipe out a forest floor with they have some toxic stuff in their actual plant matter. But I mean, there's more than one challenge out there when it goes towards kind of keeping our stream beds and surrounding areas native.
I think the reality of some of these too, there is like the scope is so large for like the invasive plant issue. Like our hope is just to be one more mouthpiece. So like all of our Hoosiers that live on a stream bank or have family that live on a stream bank that they like to go to, they can look and say like, oh yeah, that's honeysuckle. Hey, like dad or grandpa or whatever, let's get the tractor after it and we'll just clean up our property. And that's how you make a statewide difference on the issue. It's because Jacob and I know from one day of work, like there's no chance we're getting all that stuff so much.
Well, I think if one person hears this and then they go out and see one of these things, to me, I go, that's a positive, right?
Yeah,
because that was me not that long ago. A lot of the things that we talk about, might not be the end of the world, but it all sort of adds up and can be compounding, right? So
it may not be like a present detrimental effect. Like it may take several years. Could be decades. You know what I mean? But I'll tell you this. I was on Instagram, scrolling through just any other day, checking out smallmouth on Instagram, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, Indiana Smallmouth Alliance, friends with the White River. I'm like, this is interesting. No way. I didn't need, and like I'm telling you, so you guys kind of inspired that.
Super encouraging. Thanks.
All the way up in Canada. So like I'm just saying,
that made it totally worth it.
Like I'm just saying, like it's reaching all over, and there's probably more than Indiana that deals with this issue. But I think too, it's just that it just takes one person to talk about it, and then next thing you know, 3 people heard about it, 4 people, and before you know it. But I was curious to know, in Indiana, do you guys face when we talk about invasive aquatic life and like for instance like shoal bass, Alabama bass, stuff like that, do you guys face anything like that where people are wanting to kind of introduce species that aren't from Indiana?
We do have some invasive fishes that are problematic, but the Alabama bass spread, though, thankfully, is still a long ways away. It is something that's on our radar. I don't know how those fish will do with a colder climate, if they're even able to survive up here, but I do hope that's something I never see in my life. We do have 3 native blackback species in our rivers, though. So largemouth, Kentucky spotted bass, and smallmouth are all native. And there's a good chance on some of our streams you'll catch all 3 of those.
Oh, wow.
The invasive species are all like Asian carps, essentially. So we have, I think, Jacob, correct me if I'm wrong, it's bighead and black carp, and then grass carp. So those are, you've seen the ones that jump. I think those are the bighead carp.
Yeah. And
then those are a problem on some of our bigger rivers. Don't seem to find them in the small streams. I think that they need a certain amount of they're filter feeders, so they have to have enough phytoplankton or whatever they eat, and I just don't find those.
Silt and sediment.
Yeah, we do see some grass carp in some of our smaller streams, and that's they aren't great either, though. They eat a lot of vegetation and that like shoreline. I don't know if you guys have, we call it water willow, but it's like the heavy stemmed plant that just grows along the edges out to a foot or 2.
Yeah.
They eat that stuff and eat the root systems out of that. And that's like prime estuary habitat for, small bait fish and smallmouth and all the other critters in the river. So
all the bugs. Yeah.
Yeah. It all has to start, with, the plankton, and then from the plankton it's got to move on to the next and the next. And so if you take one thing that's just kind of eating everything up, it doesn't leave much for the things that actually need to survive within that ecosystem. No, like I was interested in that because you hear about how how Alabama bass can be like destructive towards native bass species. So I was interested to know if that was something that you guys obviously.
So not here. I think it's also worth noting we don't do any stocking of smallmouth in Indiana, and some of the places out east have had some, I think, hybridization that have caused some issues, to my understanding.
Yep.
I guess luckily we don't stock here, but that has been a consideration for a lot of places that have healthy strains, right? Like, there's some regulations on transporting state hatchery fish. Luckily we don't deal with that. Hopefully we won't have to.
Yeah, it's a big deal. People they just want to make their fishery better. And, aside from the instances in the Alabama bass case where the state agency actually stocked those things where they're not native, but so they just take a bucket of them and throw them in their creek, and like there's no going back after that. They're there forever. So I hope that stuff stays far away, but it's not too far away.
Shoal bass, I've heard, is kind of another aggressive one to wreak havoc on creeks and river, small streams, and all that. So hopefully that doesn't happen, because but at the same time, you guys already seem to be, you talk about it. So, awareness is, one of the greatest tools that, we have. So 2026, you got a new panel for the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance. So let's just talk about,
fun stuff.
Yeah. Like, what's going on? Like, what do you guys have planned other than meetings and all that? Like, what's happening this year with the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance?
Well, Jacob, since it was your idea, you better tell them about our big project for the year.
Oh, yeah.
So it was it'd be about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. I saw this really cool sign pop up on Instagram, and I mean, Indiana Smallmouth Alliance, while I would like to think that we were the first state to try to speak on behalf of smallmouth, there are other states down here right around us with Illinois and Missouri also have their own smallmouth alliances. And I saw a really cool sign that the Missouri Smallmouth Alliance had promoting catch and release, and just a kind of a visual guide on how long it takes for a smallmouth to grow to a certain size.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you think some person catches a 15-inch smallmouth and they're like, oh, cool fish, and just like throw it back in and don't think of anything of it. But I mean, that's a pretty old fish. I mean, you get a 10-year-old kid out there fishing and he catches a 16-inch smallmouth, that thing might be the same age or older than him. So, I mean, it's just another tool for awareness. So what I did was essentially just copy their design and information on their sign and make up our own little design and do my own artwork. And so starting this year, we've made some progress to put those signs actually out at some creek and river accesses within our state. So it's a pretty exciting thing. It's kind of our first little physical project we're doing this year in 2026. So I'm pumped for it just to
I
get
like
that
that.
education out there.
I think that's that's such great awareness, and like that's cool that you kind of like you said, if you added your own art to it, like I think that's super cool, like I think
Yeah.
that's a great, and why not, like you said, you're putting these at access points for people, and that's the best time to catch them, you know what I mean? And yeah, it's cool. Like I don't get me wrong, I love catching, big smallmouth, but anyone that wants to cross my path, it's like I still get excited as if it was a, 15, 14-inch fish to, a 20-inch fish. You know what I mean? Like it excites me the same way, as some might say size matters. To me, it's like it's the smallmouth that, it matters to me. Doesn't matter the size. But yeah, so okay, so we got this, we're taking a really good stance on that. What else? Like, do you guys run monthly meetings? Like, how does it work over for you at the Alliance?
So we don't currently have monthly meetings. It's every year we do something called Camp and Fish. So we'll pick an area of the state with good access. We'll get a campground, let people reserve sites, lots of rafts, kayaks, that sort of thing. So we're
Cool.
doing that again this year. It's going to be the weekend of August 21st. I think it's 17th
22nd
through
to
21st.
24th.
Something. Yep. It's like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We'll
Cool.
be up in the Lafayette, Indiana area, sort of where we've been the last couple years. So we're trying to lock down a site, but we have the dates. And yeah, if anybody's interested, just reach out. It's super easy. We've been having people reserve campsites, take care of it, and then we have a block of those together. Have actually met quite a few people I would have never talked with, fish with before. Great idea, and that is something, this will be the third year doing it, and I'm still excited about that. Right, fish in water I usually don't see with people I usually don't fish with. So that's one thing, and then we are going to do an event, I believe, at one of the local shops in town to do, cookout, sort of meet and greet, hangout. Again, to me, community's huge, right? I mean, um,
So true. I like
being around like-minded people. I used to fish a lot by myself. I met some of these guys, and now I, fish with people quite a bit, and I look forward to it, right? And I know others do too. So if we can provide that sort of space, to me, that's worth it. So
Yeah, well, what's like you get a group of people like-minded all together for like the same cause, same passion. Like I can't think of a better time, and like what more would you want to talk about, in smallmouth? There is so much to talk about. You can nerd out on it. Like I nerd out on this stuff all the time. And yeah, so I think that's really cool. And like the camp and fish, that's awesome. Like, for one, like families, it's easy, everybody can go.
yep,
Second, there's already loads of people there. It's cheap, and like who doesn't love camping? Like camping's like the best thing yet. And the idea that you're all just getting together with like-minded people. So no, that's I think I'm really excited for what you guys have in store. And if there's anything, is there anything else that like we got on the agenda, or is there, it's more behind the scenes that it's going to come out?
There's some stuff that we've talked about internally. I think those are our forward facing things. Bradley hit on it. And like the community part is so important because we want to, it's an opportunity to teach people, but it's also an opportunity to show them, hey, like you can you can come and volunteer and help with some of these things that were, like the sign project and whatnot. And no, so nothing else we're ready to publicly talk about, but yeah, we do get together as a board every month and strategize and talk about what we want to tackle. But that's kind of it for this year. We're trying to build a solid board, get a little bit more momentum, and focus on just a couple things and do them really, really well this year, I think. So,
yeah.
I think I like I said, I am really excited for everything that you guys have in store for this year. I absolutely love what you guys do, and I think it's really cool to sit down and talk about the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance, and who better to talk with and these guys who are not just board members, president, you guys are like-minded anglers, people who go out there, love to fish, love the sport, and just, I'll say it, like, I'm a smallmouth nerd. So like, if you fall into that category, you just jump on this bandwagon, because it is definitely,
we're all the same.
true. We're all the same, Okay. So as we come to the end of this podcast, I just wanted to say, though, where can people find the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance, and how can they get involved? How can, if somebody wanted to donate, do you guys accept donations? Like, how does this all work? And where can they find you? And if your work, can they find you guys? I'll let you, whoever wants to go, you just hit this one.
So we have a Indiana Smallmouth Alliance. We are on Facebook, Instagram. So I think it's at Indiana _Smallmouth _Alliance on the Instagram, and Facebook is all linked up with that. And Bryce does a really good job of trying to keep the content rolling on there a little bit, just to keep some community involvement on the interwebs. So we are there, and Bryce, if you want to take it away for the donations.
We also have a website. We've only been at it a couple of years, so the website is pretty and functional, but there's not a ton of content on it yet. That's something we'll keep plugging away at.
It's a little thin.
It's a little thin, but it looks great. Indiana Smallmouth Alliance.org is the website. Instagram and Facebook both take you there, and you can donate to us through that. We'll should have a dollar amount that if you contribute, you will have been responsible for purchasing one of the signs this year pretty soon.
Yeah, we have it linked to PayPal, so you can make a donation there. We also have an events tab there. Again, the only thing we have on this year so far is the Camp and Fish, because we got that scheduled. But between those three spots, it's how to find us.
There's a fair chance you might run into one of the three of us, or the other three that aren't here tonight in the stream too. So,
especially lately,
you can't find us on the internet. Just get your feet wet. You'll find us.
I like that. Come out in the waterway and walk along with me. Definitely go. If you want to make a donation, do it. I will definitely make a donation to the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance. The Camp and Fish, like they spoke about, 2026 sounds like it's going to be a really exciting time. You know what? I just want to say, guys, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance. It's super cool sitting down with you, Bryce, Jake, and Bradley. You guys, my hat's off to you guys for what you do. The drive, the purpose is all there, and the way you are just keeping, the sport and these amazing fish that, smallmouth, alive and thriving as hard as you can. Amazing. So, for me, I'm Adam Pross. I'm your host tonight of the River Run podcast. This is my episode with the Indiana Smallmouth Alliance, Jake, Bryce, and Bradley. And I hope you enjoyed listening to this. don't forget, you can definitely check out each and every one of these guys on Instagram. You can follow the Indiana Smallmouth on Facebook and Instagram. I will make sure to link everything down below in the description. And for me, this is the River Run Podcast. We'll see you next time. Later, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget, for future shows, like, follow, share, and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you check out our individual channels and accounts too. Want to be a guest on one of our shows and talk of adventures, gear, or products? Contact us. Thank you for watching The Noob Show with Matt Gibson, Chasing the Tide with Dustin Nichols, The Rusty Hook with John Rapp, The River Run with Adam Fraser Pross, May Contain Fishing with Daniel Woodcock, Chasing the 20s with Carlisle Esterly and Sean Lavery, Friday Night Bites with Brian Schiller. Thanks for tuning into the Paddle and Fin Network. Subscribe and always